Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Real World Recovery Interview Edition. I am Brett, and with us today is my good friend Caroline Beidler. Um, Caroline, appreciate you making time for us. I know you've got a ton of things going on. You are super busy, published author. You are working on the fourth annual International Women's Day Women in Recovery event. And I believe this is the first year you guys are doing it live.
Yes. Thank you so much, Brett. I'm so excited to be here. And it does feel like there's a lot going on in my life. I know there's a lot going on in the world too. I'm not alone in that. And just, yeah, it's always a gift when we can just take a pause, settle into a chair and have a conversation with someone in recovery. So I'm really excited to do that with you today.
Yeah, well, I do appreciate it. Yeah. So, wanted to just jump right in. First, for anybody that doesn't know, I'd love to have you give us, the little elevator speech, the little share your story. Tell us what brought you to recovery. What made you want to get into advocacy and pursuing a path of helping others.
Well, thank you. It's always a tough question sometimes. I know in some recovery spaces they say, the whole like share your story, what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. There's that way to kind of structure things. And a lot of times, where my mind goes is so much more now on this side of recovery than how it was back when things were really hard for me. But I appreciate the ask. And I think it's important to kind of go back there sometimes. I also want to say just quickly before I kind of dig into a little bit of that is that we know each other from growing up in a small town in southwestern Wisconsin. So I have really enjoyed watching you, Brett, grow and just what you're doing in the recovery space is so encouraging and just inspiring. So I kind of want to ask you what your perception of me was back before the year 2000. I'm nervous to do that. I don't know if we're going to go there, but anyways, it's cool to reconnect now. My story is basically so similar to so many of our stories in that, I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional, broken household. There was a lot of trauma going on, things that I didn't have words for, but I've spent a lot of money in therapy to process over the years. And, so I had a lot of instability as a child. And I think that because of that and because of some things that happened to me, when there was an opportunity to crack open a can of beer, when I was 11 years old, I did that. And I instantly, like we again hear about oftentimes, felt this feeling of, aha, okay, this feels good. I feel like I can be myself. I feel comfortable in my skin when I have a substance to help me feel that way. And so I think for a lot of years, what I did, which I know now, but I didn't at the time, was I was actually self-medicating with substances. A lot of the post-traumatic stress and different things that I had, a lot of mental health challenges. And so it really spun out of control very quickly. By 15, I was heavily addicted to drugs. I could list all of them, really any drug, pick your one. And I was heavily addicted to it and ended up going to my first inpatient treatment stay at 17. My parents, even though I grew up in a household where substance use was a part of our everyday experience, I was seen as like the outsider, kind of like this black sheep. Instead of someone asking me at 14, like Caroline, or I was called Carrie back then, what's wrong? What happened? I was instead blamed and kind of almost cast in this like bad person, what's wrong with you, something's wrong with you kind of thing. And so along with like the trauma and the substance use and more trauma as a teenage girl, which sadly happens a lot for those of us with substance use issues in high school, sexual trauma, what I had like layers of this shame and guilt that I was carrying, almost like I describe it like a heavy coat because it was almost like it was just this weight I carried with me for so many years. And it affected, how I felt about myself, the worth that I felt like I had, what I allowed into my life, who I allowed, so it was really this really very tragic cycle. And the second time I went to inpatient, so I did that. And, I think kind of we're joking about this before, but, my parents thought of it at that time like taking an antibiotic. It was like, okay, 10 days of treatment, and then you're going to be good, and then it's going to be fine. Well, it wasn't fine. And after going to treatment as a teenager, I was thrown back into all my friends who were using, all of the same household instability. And I was expected to kind of grow and flourish, and that didn't happen. And everyone was, shocked. Well, today, the good news is we have a lot more information and there's a lot more resources. And so part of the reason I'm so just motivated to be in this recovery advocacy space is because when I was a 14-year-old girl going to Platteville High School in southwestern Wisconsin, I didn't know what recovery looked like. There was not a model for me of a way of life that was different than what I was doing or different than what I saw at home. And so I am passionate about talking vocally about my recovery story and hopefully helping others know that it's not that I'm special, unique, or have some sort of whatever heroic journey. No, this is a very, like millions of us, probably like billion, globally, but it's a very common experience to struggle with substance use disorder, to struggle with addiction. And we need to know that it's normal and there are things that we can do to help. And most importantly, I think too, and I learned this through my personal experience and then working with a lot of women in recovery or seeking recovery, is we need to get to the root of some of the reasons why we started using substances, like trauma, there's all sorts of, I would say most of us have experienced some traumatic event in our life, especially the way the world is today. Just turn on the news, So, being able to address that and have healthy coping skills is so, so important. So, fast forward to today, Brett, I go by a different name today. I'm married and I also go by my birth name, Caroline. It was my grandmother's name. And I made that decision when I was in college, and it felt right because I feel like I'm just a new person. I've been made new. It's a daily, they say a daily reprieve, in 12-step literature, but it's like a daily decision. It's a moment by moment sometimes, but I can walk in this way of life today. I can walk in this newness. And so I go by a new name, but I'd love to share more about some of the things I do, or, just have more of a dialogue too about this stuff. Again, I'm just so, really honored to reconnect. And I love the way life feels very cyclical, circular, and we're all connected in this really interesting way, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it does feel like there's a certain, I like how you mentioned cyclical, because it does feel that way for me. It feels like there's a certain reconnecting that happens, and I just feel very privileged to be able to reconnect with people that I thought were gone forever from my life, due to my own bad decisions or mistakes that I'd made in the past. And because I've made the decision to fundamentally change the way I live and try to help others do the same, it's brought me opportunities to reconnect. And not because I've even necessarily gone out of my way to reach out. It's just by chance sometimes happened that way, where paths have crossed again, and I've been able to reconnect, and I've been able to rekindle those friendships and relationships. And it's kind of magical. It's incredible. There's no other way to put it. It's really something else. So, yeah, it's wonderful to see. And you're one of the people that I saw before I made the decision to get clean that really gave me that belief that it was possible. And then I've been told the same thing by other people. And that's that magical thing that happens over and over and over again. And I've heard other people say the same thing since. And it's there's no other feeling like it, and it I've never felt so fulfilled and rewarded doing anything else. And all it cost me was giving up something that was killing me. That
Right. On the outside, when you put it like that, it's like, no brainer.
yeah.
Oh, well, Brett, I have to say, it's just, and I'm like tearing up a little bit with your share, because, you sharing that, when you could see someone else in recovery and that it was possible, and that gave you hope. And now it is this cyclical giving back and, sharing this gift that we've received in recovery. And it is amazing. And you don't know who you're impacting, by the podcast that you're doing and just being vocal. When I see your posts on social media, like, hey, I just celebrated, this recovery milestone, or, hey, I'm volunteering with this treatment program. Like, this is going really well. I celebrate with you, and I just feel like it feels like it's a celebration for all of us when we see those things. So as much as I hate social media for a lot of reasons, one of the reasons I love it is because of those, connections that we can make and that we can see. And yeah,
it's somebody told me the other day that it's not even social media, it's basically paid media, and it might have been you actually.
I think it was me. It just goes on the socials. It may somehow get filtered out now, I'm not sure, but yes, I'm not going to quote, that was actually someone else had said that to me, which is so interesting. But yeah.
And I mean, it's fitting, but it's one of those things that, it serves a purpose, it has a function, but I try to look at it like I have the option to not have an opinion about most things on there, and it wants me. I look at it like its job is to get me to feel something about everything on there, and I don't have to. I don't have to have an opinion about 99% of the things on there, because at the end of the day, I don't have any control over the things that it's trying to get me to react to or respond to. And that's coming back to those fundamental things that we learn in recovery, which is it in my control? If it's not, well then I don't have any control over it anyway, so why am I spending my energy on it? And so the thing that I do control is how I use it. And the things that I want to use it for are to try to put some good out there. And that's it. And so if I'm not using it for that, then why am I on it? So that's its sole function for me, is to try to put some sort of good message out there and try to engage with people in a positive way. And if that's not why I'm on it, then I'm not opening that app.
I love that. I love it. It's almost like that, bringing recovery principles into all of our lives. Like it's, and I see that as an example of how you're interacting with social media. That's really neat. I love that.
I try, I'm by no means perfect. And, that's not the goal anyway. If I can do a little bit better today than I did yesterday, then I'm ahead of the game. So, but yeah, another thing that I did notice that I find really inspiring when I'm watching your story over the years and your progress over the years is how you've been able to not only connect with, but establish a working relationship with your mother in recovery. And I find that really inspiring and cool. And you're both in the recovery world professionally. Can you tell me a little bit more about how that started, how that works, and I just think that's a really neat relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you can see if you're watching the video, there's our book cover. So my latest book is co-written with my mom, Diana, and she also has a background in social work. She actually did a lot of work in different types of fields, but kind of over the years, we had a very tumultuous relationship for a long time, and she saw me, at my absolute worst, and really stuck by me, even though she didn't understand addiction or substance use disorder. And it's taken her a long time to understand what recovery is. But it was a couple of years ago, and recovery has allowed me to have a lot of healing and forgiveness around our relationship. And I'm so grateful for that. She's one of my best friends. And a couple of years ago, I was doing some writing. My first book had come out. I didn't know if I was going to do a second one, but I was doing some writing, and I went to the mailbox one day, and in the mailbox was this giant manila envelope from my mom. And I opened it up, and there were, I don't know, 150 pages or so of her writing about her experience with trauma. And she said, I called her and I was like, Mom, I'm assuming that you want me to read this. I'm honored. And, so I started reading, and then I called her back and was like, Mom, I'm actually writing about trauma right now. This sounds really strange. And I don't know, what you'll think about this, but I think we could do something together. And I know that my mom has always dreamed of writing a book too. She's in her 70s, and it's like one of those like bucket list. And she's been on such a beautiful recovery journey of her own version of recovery. And so she agreed, and we kind of went on this journey together. It was so much fun. I was actually able to go with her to Madison. We had, book launch events. She's been on podcasts with me. She's, continuing to write, and it's been a really amazing experience. I think really healing for both of us. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, Brett, but, when we share our stories very vulnerably, I've had people say it in the past. Sometimes you get like an emotional hangover. Like it can just be like, oh, like, did I really just share all that? And a lot of my writing is so like, I'm oftentimes like, did I just share all that? Like, that's a lot of personal stuff to just kind of put out to the world, and you don't really have any control once it's out there, but this experience of being kind of radically honest and vulnerable with our stories, I have found from the feedback I've gotten from readers and friends and my mom, is like this amazing opportunity for healing. Because when we share our stories like this, and my mom has echoed this sentiment, but like we open up and invite others to be the same, to kind of have that same experience of like, okay, it's okay to talk about this. And so there's this invitation to be honest, to be vulnerable, and to be real about our own stories. And so, anyways, to go on that journey with my mom, it's like we kind of joke about it. It's like, well, never thought we'd write a book together, about trauma, but here we go, we did it, and it's been a really, really amazing process. And I love my mom so much. She's been through a lot, and interestingly, a lot didn't make the cut in the book. That was very, a lot of really hard stuff. And, but I think what ended up in the book, it was meant to end up in the book. And, I'm just so honored, that my mom is my mom, because she's an amazing person.
Oh, my camera my camera's got a mind of its own sometimes.
Hey, that's okay. That's funny.
We've got several shorts where my camera just decides sometimes to go off on
For
its
a
own.
while.
Yeah, it's.
I don't blame you. It's the robot. It's
Yeah,
fine.
it's trying. No, that's I I find that the sharing piece is it is it can be one of those things that's like very I difficult's a hard word for me to use because it's not, because all it is telling the truth. And like it was so much harder to lie all the time.
Wasn't it?
And so like difficult's not the right word exactly, but it it can be very emotionally draining. And because it's I'm putting myself out there and being very vulnerable. And the thing though that I always try to come back to when I'm opening up, especially with people that I don't necessarily know well, is I always come back to the there's several folks that I've known over the years that I don't get to talk to ever again. And I somebody told me, one of my mentors early on said something that I'll never forget. He said, "We recover out loud so that no one else has to suffer silently." And I wish I'd heard that a decade or two earlier. Because maybe, you know, at least one or two of them would still be around. And, you know, I still miss those people immensely. And that grief and it just it never really goes away. You know, you never really stop missing someone. You, and you never truly get past those what ifs. I feel anyway. And it gets easier. You know, I don't have the blame that I used to have. I don't feel the shame, and you know, I don't hold myself responsible like I used to. But I still miss those people. They still mean just as much to me. But now I get to choose to remember all of the good things. I choose to remember just how much joy and love and light that they brought, rather than looking just at, you know, how bad I feel. And I think that that's where the healing part comes from. And I feel like it's my mission as the person who lives on, rather than having survivor's guilt. I feel like it's my job to continue to bring that feeling that they gave me to other people. You know, and you know, that's my responsibility now, because it's the least I can do. And And it's my little way of continuing to get a little bit better and continuing to heal from that. And so when I share all of the dark parts and all of the hard parts and all of the bad decisions and all the things that I had to get through in order to find bottom before, my thick head realized that enough was too much and finally decided to change. My hope is that I can help somebody else not only see that, like, well, if I can do it, they can, but I'm also hoping that they can see that, like, it's okay to feel bad. It's okay to not always have a good day. It's okay to not always be like sunshine and rainbows, because, like, on some level, I feel like that's just as misleading or just as, I think toxic is an overused word, but I feel like that's just as misrepresenting of the truth of what it actually looks like to go through a recovery journey as anything else. It's like your best doesn't always look great, but, like, as long as I get to the end of the day and I got another 24 hours, like, that's a win. Like, and sometimes I got to lean hard on other people and sometimes they lean on me, but, like, we just talk about it, and from the very beginning, I knew that the only way I took a long, hard look at myself, and I knew that the only way that this was ever going to work for me was if I was very open about it, because I was very good at masking. I was very good at being whatever anybody else wanted to be. I always knew I was a very good chameleon. I could fit in with pretty much any group. I could find common ground with all sorts of people. And so if I wasn't open and honest and transparent about what I was going through and what I was trying to do, that I would just be right back out. And so I knew from early on that the only way this was ever going to work for me was that I needed to talk about it. I needed to be open about it, and I needed to be accountable to everybody. And so it was uncomfortable at first to admit it, but that passed very quickly because, I've said it before that it was almost like as soon as I told people, yeah, I'm going and I'm checking myself in for treatment and I'm going to get clean, and it was like collectively everybody I knew, it was like I could feel this giant sigh of relief across my entire friends. Like, everybody was just like, finally. Like, I was the last one that realized it. But yeah, it's so much easier the more I do it, the talking about it. And I've I've also had to curb the offering of advice. Like I've always tried to be the person that wanted to fix things for people. And what I realized was that all I was doing was avoiding working on myself, because if I could prioritize helping somebody else, then, I didn't have to worry about fixing my own problems, because I could tell myself that, well, I'm helping them. Um, so it helps then to just talk about it, and if somebody asks for advice, then I can share that. But yeah.
But, I think you brought up so many, and thank you so much for sharing, Brett. I think it's important to have, a dialogue, but, just you're talking about the addiction, loss, and grief, that so many of us experience. I actually had a friend that I was mentoring about a year ago. She passed away the week. And so it's been really hard. It's been really dark. It's been just, when that happens, which it's happened way too much. And I know so many of us have been through this experience. It just, there's just something in my soul that hurts. And that grieving process, I feel like it does, we can move through that, but it doesn't. It's like it's always there. Um, and there are ways that we can, I feel like you said responsibility, but ways that we can almost kind of have our grief as this catalyst to support the recovery community and to kind of continue with our own recovery. And, like when was it, 2012 and 2013, I lost another young woman that I was friends with. And at that point, I mean, her name's Alex. Alex really was a catalyst for me to continue in the field and to become a recovery advocate and to do, I mean, I don't think I would be where I am today. And of course, her life, I wish she were still here, but because of what happened to her, her life lives on in what I do every day, and Elise, who I lost last week, I mean, she will continue to live and live on and inspire, I think, so many of us in our local community. So anyways, I think it's an important topic to talk about and think about. And when we think about being honest and vulnerable, to be able to share some of those experiences of grief and share some of the things we learn, sometimes by the hard way, and share about, like you just shared with what happened when you told everyone you were going to treatment, because so many of us can relate to that. So I just love just this kind of openness about our experience. And yeah, like it's not always, like, yeah, I have makeup on right now and I put on a nice shirt because I'm talking to y'all. But, usually the reality is it doesn't always look as shiny and glamorous as it does on, on podcasts or on media. Like the reality is yeah, recovery is amazing and 100% worth it. And we also go through some hard things and we need to just help each other through those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So speaking of, sharing and that, I, for myself, found a lot of connection online, because when I got clean, it was January of 2021. So, I mean, everything was locked down. It was middle of COVID. I've heard, this wasn't my experience as much, but I've heard from a number of other folks that I've talked to that regardless of which specific program, but I've heard that it can be difficult for women to find that sense of community and connection. What, if anything, has been your experience or your approach to seeking that out, or trying to build that community within those meetings or whatever, to try to encourage that and grow that.
I love that question. Well, I think so much of what I've done just kind of in the professional side of the recovery field has kind of originated from my own personal experience and kind of oftentimes those hard experiences. So I have worked with recovery housing, and part of my desire to do that at different points has been knowing what it feels like to be isolated, to be struggling with substance use, and to have nowhere safe, to go, and not have healthy community. So my experience of loneliness, and disconnection has really propelled me to help build things that create that community. Same with, when I was newly sober, one of the things that I discovered was that I had all of these interests that I had forgotten about. Like when I was a little girl, before I loved, romping around in the woods and being in nature and hiking around. And I love music, and art, and I love writing, and all of these things that addiction took from me for so many years. Once I found recovery, all of these interests and passions and hobbies kind of started coming back. It was like, wow, I'm creative, and I love, music, and I love to be hiking around. Madison, where I kind of entered recovery, was, lots of lakes, kayaking, hiking. I mean, I just discovered I loved this so much, and I wanted to share that with other people. And so, me, who was, as you knew me in high school, afraid, terrified, I've had friends around me, but I always felt alone, like just felt so uncomfortable in my own skin. I became the person who was encouraging others to go kayaking, to have like a sober game night, which, at first sounded just totally ridiculous to me. Like, this is not going to be fun. But now, but it was, and it was like in recovery, I just want to share these experiences with other people. And so I think a lot of like the hard things that I went through inspired me to share what's worked for me with others. So for me, sobriety is about way more than just quitting the substance that was, harming me, and that I was experiencing addiction with. It's so much bigger. And for me, community is a huge piece of that. And not just like sitting in a circle of chairs, which is the name of my newsletter, but sitting in a recovery meeting, but like enjoying life, finding joy in, being outside or gardening or like whatever that thing is. Like life can be so full, and meaningful and joyful. And so I just am really passionate about that. And I think when we think about building recovery community, it's not just getting people in the rooms of meetings. We need to show people what recovery can lead to. It can lead to a full and meaningful life, one that you're excited to wake up to in the morning. Yeah, meetings can be a part of that. And for many of us, a very important part of that, but there's so much more that has nothing to do with our addiction, and I want people to see what's possible, with having a new life. So anyways, I hope I answered your question. I feel like I went off in a little tangent. And I'm looking this way because out my window, I live in Eastern Tennessee now. There's beautiful woods. And so and it's a sunny day today. It's been cloudy. Anyways, it just reminds me that there's so much more out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you mentioned that, there's way more like beyond the meetings, because I'm a firm believer that that is a great foundation, and there's so much value to the treatment, both inpatient, outpatient, IOP, all of that, meetings, but that's setting a foundation, that's building a toolkit, and then it is when the real recovery journey starts, is beyond that. And I like how you alluded to building the community in addition to, you should write a book about that.
Funny you mentioned that. Thank you for that little segue. Yeah, so my next book, which is coming out in the spring of 2026 with Nelson Books is all about that. Title to be determined, so I'm not going to give anything else away, but I really wanted to explore what the recovery journey and process is and shine a light on that for folks, like me in the beginning, who thought it was all about just quitting substances. Recovery is so much more. It is this expansive way of being that does bring joy, and it brings meaning, and it brings opportunities to give back and discover new passions, and connect in healthy ways with other human beings. There's just so much more to it. And I think that if we really understood that and experienced that, my hope, at least, is that so many more of our family members could support us in the right way through that, and that we wouldn't lose so many people along the way who might not understand that piece, who might just see recovery as life that is minus substances, but doesn't see the other side of it as recovery is a way of life plus all of this other amazing stuff. So
yeah. And I also think that it's important to see it as not othering. I think that is, if I'm understanding kind of the idea of this book correctly, it's not so much a people in recovery and normies. It's recovery, like it's recovery community doesn't have to be just the people who are in recovery. It's the whole idea of the recovery community is it's just effectively community. It's educating folks about what it is like to be in recovery, and then the recovery community is really just building community that is recovery aware and recovery intelligent, and then it's just having that knowledge about it and being more in tune with that, and then being able to create a better environment for everybody.
absolutely, 100%. I'm right behind you. I love that. And I agree. I think recovery is for everyone, and if we really truly lived in, like, we all lived recovery principle. I mean, wow, I want to live in that place. So I'm going to continue writing books, I think, if I can.
Yeah. Yes, please do. Absolutely. Because I have always thought that even folks who don't struggle with substance addiction, I think that we all have, and when we had Tom Farley on the show, he even talked about this, that we all have some form of addictions, or we're all like dealing with, addiction in some way. I mean, try putting your phone down for 24 hours. Try going without coffee for a day, or, whatever it is. Like, we all have some form of, these addictive behaviors or these addictive habits, some more pronounced than others, and some that negatively impact our lives more than others. But I think that having that knowledge and those tools that we learn in recovery, especially the spiritual and the spiritual principles and the work that we do on ourselves through, whether it's step work or whatever, but being able to work on ourselves and improve who we are as people, make us just better to each other, and we create a better community and less selfish and I mean, how is that a bad thing? How is there a bad result from trying to help each other out a little bit more? How to, I just don't see the downside from any of that. And so I've always thought that, even the normies could definitely benefit from taking a little bit of a lesson from some of the tools that we learn in recovery. And so I love that that's a project that you're working on. And so, yeah, I want to help support it in any way I can. So let me know. I'm happy to plug it. So.
Well, thank you. You bring up Tom Farley too. I love Tom He's such a great guy. That's really cool. I'll have to check out that past episode. That's awesome. But yeah, it's so important to talk about. And it just reminded me. So one of the things that I'm doing just locally, and I don't put this all on blast, on social media, but there's a huge need for recovery housing. You likely know this, especially for women, and women who are pregnant or parenting. And in where I'm living now in rural Eastern Tennessee, we have zero recovery housing. So what happens when people get out of treatment here, a state funded treatment facility, that's a whole nother conversation, but they have to go either back to where they had a substance use disorder and were very ill, or go back to a bigger city, Knoxville, which is close. So anyways, I've been working on trying to bring recovery housing back here and working with other organizations. And what we keep running up against, which really points to this need for educating people about recovery, is landlords are saying, no, we do not want this home to be for recovery. They're talking to neighbors who say, no, we do not want women in recovery living next door to us. It's kind of like this, if you've heard of not in my backyard kind of attitudes about it. But I really feel like you shared, recovery brings so much more. I want people to know recovery to the point of saying, when we come to a landlord and say, we want to have a recovery house here, they will say 100% absolutely. I want nothing more than women in recovery living here. And I want all the neighbors to say that too. And it should be that way. So anyway, I have my advocacy fire burning that's starting as we're talking about it, but it is so important. And I think, again, going back to the podcast you're doing and the work that you're doing in Madison, and just, I'm sure your podcast is, all over the place. Even if we speak to one person and change their mind or their attitude about what recovery is, and put a face and a voice to that experience, like you shared, a mentor who had talked to you about, when we recover out loud, we can really make an impact. So yeah, anyways, it's super important.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. I think getting rid of the stigma and changing the perception of what that looks like, it only benefits everybody. And I think that the big thing that we can do as a community is that outreach and just be that example. And that's the attraction rather than promotion. And I think that that's the biggest thing that I can personally do is, and it goes back to one of the things that I've said before, is when it comes to all of the big changes and the big news events and all of these things with social media or on the news or whatever, when something happens, when it's outside of our control, no matter what it is, if it's outside of my control, it's almost a breath of fresh air, because my job doesn't change then. All I have to continue to do is the next right thing, no matter what. If I have no control over whatever that is, all I've got to do is whatever's in front of me. If I just continue to act with virtue and do the next right thing and look out for my neighbor and keep my side of the street clean, I'm showing that recovery works, that people in recovery are productive members of society, that I don't have to say that I'm a good person. I'm showing it. And it's so much more effective anyway, that people just see it. And you never, like you said, you never know who you're affecting or who you're impacting by doing that. The hope is just that it impacts somebody and that it helps somebody. And then there's a quote that I love from Marcus Aurelius, he says, don't seek the third thing. And what he means by that is if you've done something good for someone else, well then you've done a good thing. They benefited. That's enough. You don't need to seek credit. You don't need to seek a reward. Like, don't seek the third thing. Like, doing a good thing and someone else benefits, that's enough. And that is just a quote that's been in the back of my mind lately. And I saw something the other day that, and this is a little sneak peek at one of the things that I want to talk about on our next main episode, but I was driving home the other day, and in the middle of all of the things going on in our world, in our news cycles and everything, I'm driving home, and in the center of the little roundabout by my house, there's like a little patch of grass where there's like, the road signs and stuff. And it was after a fairly windy day. There was some trash and stuff caught up by the signs and in the grass. And there was an old man, had to be 70 or 80 years old, but he was standing out in the middle of the roundabout, just picking up trash. And I rolled down my window as I drove past, and I thanked him. I was thinking about that the rest of the day, and I was like, how many people, instead of doing that, would have been calling the city to complain, or going on social media or like Nextdoor or whatever to complain about it, or taking photos and posting it online to complain about how messy the streets were and where was the trash pickup and all, like any litany of things, or even just walking past it and doing nothing. This man didn't want to see the trash, so he just went out and picked it up. It wasn't his trash. He didn't throw that out. But he just went out and picked it up because he didn't want to see the trash in his neighborhood. It took so much less work. It probably caused him so much less stress. And everybody benefited.
Love that. I love that so much, that story. Hey, it might end up in my next book, and I will quote you because I love that so much. I think it's such a beautiful picture of how we can really show up, for each other. And I love that you acknowledged him, because I'm likely wasn't asking for that, but sometimes just that nod of like, I see you and thank you really means a lot. And he may have needed that in that moment. So good for you for doing that.
Yeah. We all need a little thank you once in a while. So,
Yeah.
But, yeah. I know we're coming up on. I know you got a hard stop here. And you had asked at the beginning, about back in high school.
Oh no, here we go. Oh no, here we go.
So we'll go a little, we'll go a little lighthearted here. We didn't hang out a lot, but no, I thought nothing but good things of you. I always thought, you were, lighthearted. You seemed like a person that got along with pretty much everybody. You definitely seemed like the kind of person that most people wanted to be friends with. We kind of ran in different friend groups. You were a year behind me in school, I believe.
Think so, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, by the time I was like actually like able to like get around, once I was driving, I was, getting myself into trouble with my own group of delinquents, and so
We each had our own delinquent friends, like the after school special kids that the kind of kids they made after school specials about. Yeah.
yeah, that facts.
Yeah. That's
But
so
yeah, I
funny. Well,
mean,
it's unfortunate. We could have gotten into a lot of trouble together, Brett. Um,
yeah, in various and creative ways, I'm sure.
I'm sure. Well, I prefer connecting with you today, and in the way that we are. So I appreciate again just so much being able to talk with you, and so just happy for you and your journey. And I just love staying connected and just seeing what your milestones and your shares there. So I'll continue to follow along with your podcast and just what you're up to on social media too.
Likewise, and yeah, again, I truly appreciate it, and again, we'll plug the March 8th, the Women in Recovery International Women's Day. We've got we'll put a link and everything in the show notes. It's I think it's a Zoom live event, and then we'll get all your links to your socials and newsletter, and then keep an eye out spring 2026 for the TBD book,
Mhm.
and then all of your other books, and You Are Not Your Trauma, which I think we've got it actually cut off because they've got you split screened. Um, so, but but yeah, we'll get your links up there, and yeah, any other anything that we didn't get to that you want to make sure we.
I think we covered some really good ground. It was great, and I love that we both love a good Ryan Holiday book. So that's a fun fact. But yeah, I think
Yes.
we just keep on. We just keep on doing the thing, and whether we're motivated by people that we've lost and people that we support today, and motivated by our own experiences, like we just keep doing the thing and putting one foot in front of the other and trusting that our stories will make a difference. I know yours has always already made a difference, for me and so many others. So thank you, Brett.
Well, I appreciate that, and yeah, again, I really appreciate you coming on and making some time. I know how busy you are, so um, ooh, yes. One last time, thank you so much, Caroline Beidler, and I'll let you get back to your incredibly busy day, but thanks again, and if you folks haven't by now, please feel free to hit the like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and head on over to Caroline's socials, like and follow and subscribe to her stuff, and we'll throw the links in the description below. Other than that, thanks everybody for tuning in. Thank you again, Caroline. It was great to see you. You are welcome back anytime.